go. Can you hear me to the back?
Yeah.
You good? Perfect. Hi guys, I'm Ollie. Thanks for the introduction. I do work for a company called AppScatter. I won't tell you too much about them because normally these things I find a bit boring when people talk about their company, trying to sell them. So I'll just get straight into things. I wanted to look at going beyond Google. There's a misconception within the industry that there's only Apple or Google that devs can distribute their apps or games to. Now this is completely false, and while they're two of the biggest, or they are two biggest app stores out there, they are not the only ones. I wanted to start with a little game. I know we are a bit warm from the introductions, but I thought this would get you guys even warmer. So it's a guess the face. So I've picked 4 people from within the games, mobile space, and I want to see if you guys know who they are. If you do, just stick your hand up or shout out, and we'll see if you can get them right. So first one, father of the mobile phone. Anybody know who this is? Nobody. Nobody at all. Oh, guys. Martin Cooper created the mobile phone. Let's see if you can get the next one. Correct. Andy Rubin, who was the co-founder, former CEO of Android Inc. before they sold to Google. This man here. Flappy Birds. Anybody heard of Flappy Birds? Yeah. No one knows his name. Deng Wen. So, this guy was making 50k a day on Flappy Birds and then just deleted it. So if anybody can tell me why, please let me know, because I think he's nuts. And finally, this man, big name in the industry. Correct, Miyamoto. He is the creator, designer of Mario, Zelda, Donkey Kong, Star Fox, bit of a legend. So, on to the talk. As I was saying, going beyond Google, there's more app stores out there. I wanted to start with an analogy, and I've sort of posed this one before, and I got a real mixed reaction from it. But I want to see what you think. From looking outside of from the industry, it seems a little bit backwards that of all of these marketplaces that are out there, that we only distribute to 2. Now, I want you guys to imagine that you're Cadbury's chocolate, okay? You've got this wonderful confectionery bar, and you've got 72,000 employees, you're worth billions of dollars, but you only sell your chocolate bars in Tesco and Asda. Now, to me, that seems a little bit silly. You'd want to get it into petrol stations, convenience stores, anywhere that you could possibly get it to get the maximum exposure. Yes, it's not going to sell in such quantities, but if you look at it as a cumulative amount, you're looking at getting close to the figures that are selling in Tesco and Asda. And that's essentially what I'm sort of posing to you today. Apple and Google, they're massive, but there are other marketplaces out there. So some quick stats, because I like them. This 83 billion only takes into account the top 8. Now there are hundreds of app stores out there, hundreds of marketplaces for your apps, your games. The top 8 was circa 83 billion downloads last year. That's about 38% of the whole global market. All of these figures that I'm going to give to you tonight, they are the industry's best guess, okay? We all know that the data that we're given from various outlets is never 100% correct. But this is the industry's best guess at how we're doing. I'm not going to read off the slides, so if you're bored of my voice, you can just read what's up there. But it should give you a flavour. The top 5 countries by downloads, you've got 4 emerging markets in there. That's 4 countries in which the downloads are starting to really grow and the revenue that will come with it. Number 5 is obviously the United States. Downloads there are massive. They're really keen on Apple, and Google, Android is starting to get there as well. That market is mature. They've gone through the high growth phase where they're getting really high downloads, and the revenue is starting to come now, which is why it's so popular. These other 4 are in that stage of starting to get towards maturity where they're getting really high downloads, and in 2-3 years time the money will follow. 300 app stores, that's a bit of a shock to people. 100 of those are in China, but there are a bunch of other ones as well. There's a couple of memes in there just to entertain myself. So some charts, again, just to illustrate the talking points that I'm sort of making. The first one is top countries, as I was saying. Now, I don't really want to speak too much about China. I'll do a bit. They are the biggest market in the world by far, which is why I sort of need to speak about them. But then you see these other emerging markets as well. You've got India, Brazil, and Russia that are at the point or close to the United States at the moment. Now, these markets are set to boom pretty soon. If you want any of these graph charts, whatever, just drop me a line on LinkedIn. I'll send them all to you there. Now, this is looking at the competition side of things. So, Google Play, I think on the last count, there was 3.3 million apps on Google Play. 80% of those apps are downloaded less than 1,000 times. So, either your app's got to be pretty special or you've got to be plugging into a lot of money to get them noticed. Competition's really high and supply way outstrips demand. I've put Amazon up here as an, sort of an alternative in the Western market. I don't particularly love Amazon as an app store. Sorry if you're from Amazon. Amazon is good if you've got a kid's game or an educational app. The games that do well, the apps that do well on Amazon are generally focused on the kids market, and that's because of the devices that they're played on. So the Fire TV, Fire Kindle, Fire Tablet, they are, in terms of the sort of other tablets out there, they're pretty cheap. Parents buy them for the kids play them, play the games. And in the Western market, we're used to spending money as adults on our phones, and that transfers down through to spending money on the kids' tablets too. That's all from Amazon. And then China. So it's pretty massive. They themselves had 80-something billion downloads last year. And if you take a little look, you can be in 3 Chinese app stores and have 50% of market share. Now there's 550 million devices in China, the majority of them all using Android. The problem with China is, it's really difficult to get into. You need to be approved by a government agency before you can be on any app store. And another, well, 2 reasons. You need a partner in China in order to get your revenue out, but also there's really high levels of piracy there. You can stick your fantastic Apple game on there, and then 2 days later someone would have pirated, localized, made it look way better, and that's all of your hard work down the drain. If that were me, I'd be pretty pissed off. Okie dokie, on to the next one. Emerging markets. So this is where I really wanted to focus. Let's go for another graph. I really like this graph. It indicates really well where the different emerging markets are. So you've got the top tier Chinese cities, you've got Japan, you've got the US. They're, as I said, at a point where they're at maturity. So they've had huge high levels of downloads, and now they're starting to get the money through. The revenue's pouring through, and people are out making some serious amount of money. Then you've got the UK. We're a bit smaller anyway. Our market is starting to mature as well. And then you've got down here, you've got the rural areas of China. I kind of discount them because they'll go in the same way as the rest of the Chinese market. But then you've got Brazil, India, Russia. These are the markets that I'm speaking about, whereby there is exponential growth happening at the moment in terms of downloads. And although the revenue isn't there yet, it will become available to tap into in the next couple of years. So let's take a really quick look at each of the 3 markets that I've mentioned. India, super interesting market actually. It's one of my favourites. They're really hot on free-to-play games at the moment. So stuff with in-app purchasing doesn't really work. The problem with India is that they're hugely cash dependent when it comes to currency. They're not used to spending money on credit cards, and they're not used to spending money on their mobile devices yet. That will come, as I said. The other really interesting thing about India is that this rapid growth has been driven by substantial subsidies that the government have poured into allowing unlimited 4G access across the country. So now that this access is available, more people are buying more smartphones, and that's where these downloads are coming from. And the growth in revenue will happen from there. Brazil. Now, to be completely honest with you, Brazil's a massive market, but it's not one that I've had much experience in. They've got 2 really good local app stores that do really well out there, primarily because Apple and Google are so competitive. It's like the US and like Mexico in the fact that it's really hard for developers and publishers of apps to get noticed. But they are hugely engaged, as you can see from those figures there. It's a growing market again, and if you can nail it well, then you'll do really well. Localization is really important in Brazil, and I've got a figure later which illustrates that quite well. And then the final one's Russia. When I first came into this sort of industry, I wouldn't count Russia as an emerging market, but it is. And it's all down to this policy here, whereby the government said, look, you as a telecommunications company need to give 3G and 4G access to anybody that lives in a population of over 10,000 people. And this, like in India, has made the downloads shoot up, and there's a little bit more revenue coming through, but that again will climb. The other interesting thing about Russia is that non-Russian developers and publishers seem to do way better than the local ones. I'm not quite sure why that is, whether it's the quality of games and apps out there, but this poses a real opportunity for developers. And they don't like Apple either. They, being Russia, they don't like the Americans particularly well, and so Apple being the epitome of Russia, of America, they tend to stay away. So the Android market makes up about 70% of all Russian devices. Okie dokie. What's next? Okay, Ollie, you've told me that I can publish my app on all of these fantastic app stores. Do I just go out there and organically get millions and millions of downloads? Absolutely not. It's a lot harder than that, but it will be worth it. There is a whole bunch of factors that you've got to take into account when going into these other app stores. As I said, at the moment, a lot of them aren't at the point where you're going to make huge amounts of money if you nail it like you do in this country, in America, in the sort of Middle East. You're going to need to do a number of things like you do over here, but for every app store that you go onto. The primary one being localization. It seems really obvious, but it's super important. And this little story down here sort of tells its own tale. In case you can't see that, it basically says, in 2012, developers of Call of Duty Black Ops 2 localized their game into Brazilian Portuguese. Consumers noticed and sales were 300% higher than previous year. That's literally all they did. They localized, and then they got this massive growth in revenue from the previous year. So localization done properly, more downloads, higher revenue. If it's something that you want to do, I know a couple of great companies, so you can come see me afterwards and I can put you in touch with them. There's another couple of things that you've got to do. Culturalization is a really important point. Who knows what game this is? Clash of Clans, yes, but it's localized to the Chinese market. Completely different in terms of graphic text than we would see over here in the West, but this is how it works over there. And this is a really interesting story. Supercell, the guys behind Clash of Clans, they spent all of this time and money localizing it, put it into just one of the Chinese app stores, and in the first month they got something like 200,000 downloads. What they'd forgotten to do was take the Google payment system out the back end And so nobody could buy anything on their games. So you had all these users wanted to spend money, and they got no money at all out of that. So it's important to get that right. And there are a number of SDKs out there that will allow you to do this. It will override Google's system, or you can swap them in and out. The other things, obviously ASO, user acquisition, marketing. I'm not an expert on any of these things, but you need to look into each one, because each store has different algorithms, and you'll get featured in different ways on there. I think there's a figure going around that you're 20% more likely to feature on one of these alternate app stores than you are to feature on Apple and Google. And obviously, if you feature on an app store, your downloads grow exponentially. So it's worth looking into. That is about it from me. So if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Yes.
So I think it was yesterday they highlighted the fact that Apple makes twice as much as Google does worldwide.
Yeah.
So I just wonder what your thought about was that.
Yeah, and that's down to the audience. So if I can afford an Apple product, I've clearly got enough money that I can spend a decent amount in app. Google Play is really low for that. I think the average customer on Google Play, the lifetime value is like 22 pence. And Apple, it's something like 84 pence, something like that. Amazon sits in the middle at about 60 something, I think. But yeah, it's difficult. But in terms of the wider scope, the wider world, Android's way more popular in these other stores. So you'll get more users than you will on Apple if you go into these other markets. Anyone else? Sure.
Are there any services or companies that will help you or do this for you, like distribute your app for you?
Yeah, there are a bunch out there. AppScatter is one of them. Thanks. That do offer them. You can literally put in app distribution into Google and you'll get a couple of different ones. I'm not going to give you a recommendation. But there are that make it simple. My personal recommendation is that you look into it now, but you don't necessarily act on it immediately. It takes a lot of time and effort to go into these markets, and at the moment you can make a lot of money on Google and Apple, where it is. But it's something to consider in the next couple of years when Apple and Google mature even more and the markets become even more competitive. There's this other stream of revenue that you can use at the same time to get more exposure, and it is a lot easier than trying to get yourself on Apple and Google. Anyone else? Yes, at the back.
It's like Play Store has a lot of support for release management and crash statistic and install statistic.
Yeah.
So how does that compare with all the alternatives?
It doesn't really compare, to be honest. Google is way better at it than most of these alternate stores at the moment. The thing to bear in mind, as I see it, is that as these other emerging markets grow, these app stores will grow and they'll be able to offer a similar service to Apple and Google. Some of the big ones do, Yandex, Bmobi, One Store, they offer those sort of supports, but these smaller stores, the incremental revenue stores, that is something that it will come. And again, this is why I'd sort of give the advice of a couple of years, because they need to grow as much as the market. Yeah, the back.
What about fragmentation? How does these markets affect the devices they are on?
So, at work, we've not really seen that. If you are eligible to distribute on Google Play, you are generally able to distribute on 36 more app stores. And it is as simple as plugging in your binary. There's nothing else that needs to change. Your ads will work the same. If you install the correct SDK, your in-app purchasing will work exactly the same as well. Is there a question here?
You mentioned that piracy is a problem in China.
Yeah.
How big of a problem is it in other apps or all the other apps?
Good question. It depends on the app store. So you've got some app stores which are rife with it. Aptoid have got a massive, massive audience, but they're awful for piracy. Some of the biggest names in the business have their apps pirated, and it basically, if you submit an update for a certain app, you'll take over that app. It's ridiculous. So you've got to be quite aware of the different stores that you're going onto, and I'd advise doing some research beforehand. But a lot of them are safe and have a lot of procedures in place to keep it that way.
And do you have any experience with the support of these app stores? Like, can you talk to them in English and get some help?
Yeah. So again, depends on the store. A couple of these stores that are doing quite well are just literally 5 guys in an office, and they're so hard to get hold of. And some of them are massive organisations. So it really depends. But again, I think the support will come as they grow, and as they start making money, their companies will grow as well. Cheers, guys. Thank you.